Hello, everyone. Welcome to our lesson 35 of chapter 35 of our course Initiation to Spiritism. Today, we will be addressing the parable of the sower. And I hope to be able to share with you a way of going over a parable and peeling the layers of meanings that are embedded in each one of these parables. So we are going to start from the beginning. Let's review the parable of the sower. So we are going to start here, our first slide. Listen, behold, a sower went out to sow. And it happened as he sowed that some seed fell by the wayside, and the birds of the air came and devoured. Some fell on stony ground where it did not have much earth, and immediately it sprang up because it had no depth of earth. But when the sun was up and it was scorched, and because it had no root, it withered away. And some seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no crop. But other seed fell on good ground and yielded a crop that sprang up, increased, and produced, some 30-fold, some 60, and some 100. Very well. So this is the end of our parable here, and we are going to look at what is the context that the parable was told. What are the elements? What is the meaning of those elements? And what is the application? So that's how we are going to break down the study and the understanding of the parable. So starting with the context, right? So where do we find these parable? We find in three different gospels: the Gospel of Luke, Matthew, and Mark. And we are going to still continue with the context. We're going to look at the Gospel of Matthew. When we look at the Gospel of Matthew, we are going to realize that this parable is, for example, together with other parables, and they all constitute this group of parables that are called the parables of the kingdom. So I put here at the very beginning of each one of these parables, like the parable of the wheat and the weeds. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. The parable of the mustard seed. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted also in his field. The parable of the leaven. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 sacks of flour until it was all leavened. And then we have the parable of the treasure. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. The parable of the pearl. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. And once again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net, was let down into the lake and caught all kinds of fish. So you notice that I have some words highlighted in yellow. And when we look at these, all these different parables, what we realize is that the kingdom of heaven is always where? Within. It's always inside something. So that is the common denominator for all these parables. So that's one first item that is important for us to understand. So where is the parable? What is the context in the gospel? As well as if you look at the gospel according to Spiritism, where do we find this parable? This parable is in the chapter that the title is Be Perfect. And prior to the parable itself, we have 3 items. And the items are characteristics of perfection, moral persons, and good spiritists. And then we have the parable of the sower. We know that Kardec is the codifier, and his role was to organize. So things are not in the book randomly. There's not a random order for the items. So the parable of the sower in this context, it tells us, okay, how is it that the message is absorbed? How is the message integrated? And how is it that the message ends up bearing flowers and eventually fruits to humanity. So you have the characteristics of perfection, moral person, good spiritist, and then the parable of the sower shows the process, what is necessary for the message to bloom, to flourish, to fructify, and turning each one of us into those individuals who have achieved a higher level of consciousness, of awareness. Okay, so with this understanding, we get back to the parable in the very first sentence of the parable. A sower went out to sow. So when we look at the first sentence, and I'm going to go back here to the sower. Let's start with the sower, right? So the sower, who is that person? So the sower is any one of us who is willing to sow, who is willing to share the message, who is willing to be useful, that understands that we are here on this earth with a purpose. We have a purpose of self-enlightenment, but also we have a purpose of making a contribution. And when we are touched by the message and we start to, when we absorb and we integrate the message in ourselves, and we start to seeing the first fruits and the first flowers, making our own living prettier and better, we start, whether we are conscious or not, to be sowers because we are manifesting the message in ourselves. So sower is anyone who understands that we have a mission. All of us have a mission, and we can be making an impact in life by manifesting the truth, by manifesting the teachings in our own selves, in our own living. Now, next, we find that a verb. So the verb to go. So the sower went out to sow. So when we look at this, we have to think. This sower didn't stay where he or she was and just sow to the soils right next to him. He actually went out. So there is an action. There is the fact there's movement going out. There is a distance that is covered when that sower decides to sow the seeds of truth. Now, Emmanuel will analyze this passage and will expand our understanding of what went out actually can mean. And this is what we are going to find right here in Living Spring, chapter 64, that the title is Sowers. He will say, it is necessary to tear down the old prison of the point of view and devote ourselves to serving our neighbor. As we learn the science of extracting ourselves from the dark jail of the self, we start a journey through the great continent called everyone's interest. And in its infinite expanse, we find the land of the souls, choked with thorns, filled with misery, covered with stones and poisoned with mire, thus offering us a divine opportunity to act for the good of all. So here, Emmanuel invites us to think about going out not only as a physical motion of actually leaving the place where we are to meet other souls where they are, but also as a spiritual, psychic, and emotional movement of giving up our own points of view. And it's so beautiful the way that he talks about this. So moving from being so self-centered, right? Understanding only what our view is and our need, and actually traveling to another continent, which is the continent of everyone's interest. So what's best for everyone? Not anymore what's best for me, but what's going to make sense for the majority of people, right? And then we're going to find all kinds of different soils as we go out, suffering, misery, difficulties, limitations. And in this movement, whether it's physical movement or a spiritual movement, we're going to find plenty opportunities for service. Very well. So moving on, we're going to look at now some of the elements and some of the meaning. I apologize, meaning it was a typo here. But we understand where the parable is, the context of the parable, right? We look at this very first sentence. So another way you can study parables is actually going by the words and spending some time meditating on the words. It would take an enormous amount of time here, so I'm not going to do that. But I wanted to put examples on different ways that you can study different parables. Okay, so another way is, like I said, we can look at the elements and the meaning of the word, of the elements. So what are the elements for this particular parable? We have the sower, which we're going to get back to the sower in a little bit more. We have the seed and we have the soil. So we're going to start with the seed. It's really interesting because the seed is actually the message, right? The seed is the truth. And what is really striking about the seed in this particular parable is the fact that the seed is never lost. And this is very important for us to remember. Even when the seed falls outside of the way, right, on the side of the road, what happens to the seed? The birds come and take the seed. So the seed is going to nourish the birds. So when it falls on the stony soil, it's going to start, it's springs. It's not going to flourish. It's not going to give any fruits because there's not enough depth, but it doesn't get lost either. And then it's going to, in the next soil, which is the one with the thorns, it does actually produce some flowers. And in the good soil, we produce some fruits. So the seed, the truth, is always going to prevail. That is really important because a lot of times we are frustrated because we believe as sowers that the seed is lost, and it's never lost. So our role as sowers is just to throw the seed. And the seed is so powerful because it's the divine message. So it will never, ever get lost. This is something that is really important for us to keep in mind as we become more conscious sowers in our trajectory. The next element is the soil. So the soil, we have the wayside, which represents, the soils are the state of the human soul, right? So if it's a wayside soil, that means that the soil represents people who are not interested or not yet ready to embrace, to receive the message. The stony soil is the soil that is shallow. So a lot of people will hear the message, whether it's the spiritist message or spiritualist or a message of enlightenment, and they get very excited about the message. They think the message is life transforming. They want to do a lot of things and tell a lot of people, but that enthusiasm only goes so far. So once they get into the challenges of actually living the message, of relating with others, and are actually invited to do the difficult work, then they go to the next new thing that they can also embrace with enthusiasm, but the message does not find a soil that is ready yet to produce anything. So this is your stony soil. Then you have the soil with thorns. Now here, the seed is going to spring, and actually is going to produce, is going to bloom. We're going to have some flowers. But the message, the seed is going to be suffocated. Suffocated by what? Suffocated by our material interests, suffocated by our illusions. So a lot of us, right? I like to think that the human soul is this vast field where some patches of the field are wayside. We're not quite ready to go there yet. Some patches of the field are stony. We get enthusiastic about certain things. Yeah, this makes sense. This is kind of cool, but it doesn't go too far within us. There's a lot that we actually nowadays is able to hear, to absorb, and even it blooms. It starts to kind of showing some outcomes in our daily lives, but we are constantly struggling in between fully embracing what we know to be best for us and all the other things that pull us against it. Stay here, focus on the material, and embrace this fast reward as opposed to why invest in so much and wait so long for the outcomes if you can be pleased and be satisfied so much more readily through the material realm. So those are the thorns. And then we have patches of good soil where actually the message finds the appropriate conditions to produce fruits. So those are the soils, different conditions of the human soul in regards to their ability to absorb, to integrate, to nourish enough the seed so the seed can produce. So here we have a few questions that I put for us to think about. What is the condition of your inner soil, right? So something for us to reflect. How much time and energy is being allotted to care for the soil? Are we able to identify the thorns within us suffocating the seed? And are we open to the interventions of the divine sower? Because we have God, who is the divine sower, and through its laws, through life, it's working on, is spreading the seeds, but also working on the soil of our own souls, because God is not only the divine sower, but he's also the divine agriculture, and he's the divine everything. So he not only uh, spread the seeds, but he's working for the transformation of our own inner soil. So how open have we been to that? How much time have we put into this? So that's how we take the message also and make the message something that makes sense and can be part of our daily lives. We need to take the concepts and ask ourselves these questions and think about it so that we can grow with the teachings. So moving on, we have now the sower himself. So here again, it is Emmanuel who is going to help us, and this is part of the same message that I already brought the reference in previous slide, a different paragraph where he's going to say, the sower from heaven left his grandeur and came to us to spread the light of revelation and to increase our vision and discernment. And even though he could have been replaced by thousands of messengers if he had wanted to, he humbled himself so that we could be exalted, and he put himself in darkness so that our light could shine. Therefore, let us leave our inhibitions behind and learn with the Master to go out and to sow. Love this. It speaks about Jesus as a divine sower who came to sow in the name of God, right? Now think about that in terms of when he tells us the parable and the sower went out. What did his go out mean? I mean, we are talking about someone, a spirit who left the higher spheres, the angelic realms where he resides, to immerse himself in this world 2,000 years ago. That is the distance that he traveled as a sower, not only physically, but also spiritually, lowering himself to the level of primitivism that we live in 2,000 years ago to be with us. So, of course, that um, Jesus is and will be always this reference for us. We are unable to go that far or that distance, but we should be striving to be able to go further and further, following his example. And one thing that I really like that Emmanuel says here is that a lot of times we'll say, I'm not ready. I can't do this. I'm not ready yet. And it's a mistake really to think that we need to be ready, because it is the work that is going to actually prepare us to be more ready. So all of us have talents. All of us have been given talents. Um, Maybe you can't speak. Maybe you cannot be doing a class like this. Uh, Maybe that's not what you can do. But can you hug someone? Can you smile to someone? Right? Can you say something positive? I mean, so there's plenty work to be done. There's plenty need out there. And all of us can travel some distance to meet people. And we don't need to be ready. Because if we needed to be ready, then there would be no workers, because none of us is actually ready. We all fallible, we all humans, we have limitations and darkness, but it is precisely the work, this movement of going outside of ourselves, finding other soils, and spreading the seeds, doing our part, that actually will help us to continue to evolve. So it's really pretty, this passage of Emmanuel. And the sower uses different tools, methods, and skills in this work. So, as far as tools, one of the major tools is the use of time. So, there is a time for everything under heaven. And the same way that there is time for the seasons and for things in nature, each one of us is also part of nature. So there's seasons for humans as well. There's seasons for the message to be able to flourish. So Jesus was very in tune with the seasons and the time. He understood that it would need time for the soil to be ready, for the seeds to be able to bloom. And this did not deter him in doing what he needed to do, because he was very understanding and respectful of people's times. Second, he used different methods to spread the seeds. He used words, but he also used silence, and he used examples. Now, I want to highlight silence here, because our association to spreading the seeds is always through what I'm doing right here, right? Talking. But sometimes, much better than to say something is not to say anything. So let's think of an example. So when Jesus, for instance, is on his way to be crucified, that he was being chastised, that he was being hurt, that he was being tortured, and that he was undergoing such an incredible, unfair trial and in the hands of humankind. What were his words on the way to the cross? None, none. At that time, there was not one complaint. There was no need to justify. There was no accusation. There was no complaint of any type. There was no criticism. There was not even any teaching other than absolute quietness. Because at that time he was fulfilling his mission. And in incredible silence, he was leaving us a profound message, which is a message of acceptance of God's will above ours. In that moment, more than being a master, he was being the Son of God, the obedient Son, fulfilling his mission and teaching us the need to acquiesce and the need to follow, to follow God's directions. So he sowed the seed by actually not speaking. It's a silence that resonates up to these days in a very loud way, a very important seed that he sowed at that moment. So sometimes it's not what we say, is what we don't say that is also important. And of course, his examples are the reason why the gospel is still alive. Because if he had only said things but had not lived the very same things that he was saying, the message would have had been lost. Now, he used certain skills such as respect and love. So he respected, he was very in tune with who the people that he was talking to, who they were, what was the circumstances of their lives. So he was a very, very skillful master. When I went over the parables in the very beginning of our lesson today, the parables of the kingdom, we noticed that he spoke about absolutely the same concept about 6, 7 different times using different analogies. Why is that? Because he was talking to different people, and to each one of them, he used elements of their own world to characterize the kingdom of heaven. So, to the man who dealt with the field, it was a seed in the field. To the man who dealt with money, was the treasure in the field. To the fisherman, was the net that was thrown into the sea. So you see, he used the elements. He respected the person, their level of understanding, what made sense to them, and he spoke to them in a language and with a care and with a love that they could understand and could absorb the message. So all these are important characteristics for us to keep in mind when we are out there sowing, right? To be a good sower, what would be necessary? To understand the soils, to respect time, to adapt the ways that we sow to the people, to the circumstances that people are living, to be respectful of people's times and what they can grasp at any given moment. And on top of everything else, or intertwined in everything that we're doing, always, always the presence of love. In other words, you sow always respecting, always dignifying the person, the soil that you are dealing with. All right, and here we see an example from Paul, how Paul, as a sower, powerful sower, integrated these ideas that I'm talking about here, right? So in his letter to Corinthians, he's going to say, even though I am free of the demands and expectations of everyone, I have voluntarily become a servant to any and all in order to reach a wide range of people, religious, non-religious, meticulous moralists, loose-living moralists, the defeated, the demoralized, whoever. I didn't take on their way of life. I kept my bearers in Christ, but I entered their world and tried to experience things from their point of view. I've become just about every sort of servant there is in my attempts to lead those I meet into a God-saved life. I did all of this because of the message. I didn't just want to talk about it. I wanted to be in on it. So this is beautiful, and I think it really summarizes Paul's understanding and respect. I mean, it's so powerful when he says that, he was there sowing to anyone and to everyone, and he didn't give up on his ways. He was always faithful to what he believed, and following Jesus and the gospel. He didn't betray his own values. But what he did in being with different people in different conditions, in different circumstances, he tried to understand where they were coming from. He tried to put himself into their experience to better understand, again, what they were experiencing, what felt to be true to them, and be able to more effectively show. In our groups, I have an experience with the American group that I was guiding for a long time in a course in our center. And, one difficult topic was always mediumship and pain mediumship, and questions about that. And it would be of no service if I didn't empathize or seek to empathize to the culture, the history of mediumship in this country, for example, to understand where they were coming from. So, without ever giving up on the ways that Spiritism understands that, we can have a dialogue, a respectful and loving dialogue, without disconsidering, without minimizing someone else's experience, without being disrespectful with someone else's experience. So that would be like one example of that. Okay, and the last part, it is the application, right? So how do we apply this message? And so again, who are the sowers? We started to answer this question in the very beginning of our lecture. And right here in the Spirit's book, I bring this question that will give some more information, about a reminder about of what is that we are doing here, what is the purpose of our incarnation. So incarnation also has a further objective, which is to place spirits in condition where they can do their share of work of creation. On each world, they clothe themselves with an instrument which is in harmony with the essential matter of that world, in order to execute in that instrument the orders of God. In this way, while contributing to the general work, they progress at the same time. So I did mention this idea in the beginning of the talk, and it is found in the Spirit's book in question 132. So any one of us can be a sower. And the invitation is first to be conscious sowers. In other words, to make service a part of our lives. And to make service a part of our lives doesn't mean schedule service, doesn't mean the soup that I give on Sundays at 10 a.m. or the hour that I spend on the center on whichever day, right? Service as a way of life. Every minute, every moment, if you have that intent and that awareness within you awaken and within reach, you that permeates your living. So you understand that you are at service at all times with all people, in your home, in your work, in society, at the gym, anywhere and everywhere. Your mindset, your energy is at service of life. Where do I start? How do I start the work if I'm not yet doing this? So we start from the beginning. So here is again Paul to Corinthians, when you sow, you do not plant the body that will be, but just a seed, perhaps of wheat or something else. So I love this, because what he's saying is, you don't start any work with something that is already ready, right? That's already built. You start from the beginning. You start with a seed, and that's okay. You got to start from somewhere. So it's just a reminder. that is okay if we start slow and small. But the important thing is for us to start. And here in our daily bread, chapter 7, the seed, Emmanuel is going to tell us the seed. What does the seed exemplifies? It wisely exemplifies the need for starting points. Conscientious work demands proper places and appropriate times. There are restless and insatiable persons who have not yet understood the symbol of the seed. They expect great accomplishments from one day to the next. Knowing how to begin is a very important skill. In our redemptive effort, we must not lose sight of the smallest possibilities. A gesture, a conversation, an hour of your time, or word can represent glorious seeds for immortal accomplishments. So this is it. Sometimes we may say, there's nothing I can do, or I'm irrelevant, or I don't have anything to give. And that is not true. We are in a moment of our planetary transition that calls for souls, calls for every single person of goodwill to be at service. We need more people engaged consciously in goodness, in this mindset. Charity, what we call charity today, needs to be our part of our ordinary living, not something extraordinary that takes doing our extra time. It needs to become a way of living. But we need to understand too that it's a process, and a process has to start from somewhere, and you have to take a first step. You have to make a choice. From today on, I'm going to be a sower, and I'm going to donate to life the best that I can. And that best today can be a smile. Believe me, there's so many people who would benefit from a smile. Can be a hug, can be a positive posting on social media, whatever that might be. If it's something that you can do, you do it. And finally, closing here our conversation for today, our class. What to expect when you decide to be a soul, when you decide to make a contribution. Not everybody's going to understand, not everybody is going to follow you on your path. So there's this very, it's kind of a well-known passage, difficult to understand sometimes, that we find in the Gospel of Matthew. And everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother, wife or children, or fields for my sake will receive 100 times as much and will inherit eternal life. We have a difficult time understanding this passage. What is it that Jesus meant by leaving all the people that we love? It doesn't seem to make sense. But what that means is not everybody is going to embrace your idea of service and your pathway of enlightenment. And in that case, it's necessary to understand that we cannot please and that we should not delay our own evolution in the work that needs to be done because of others, no matter who they are. But that also does not mean that we are abandoning them or leaving them behind. And this is precisely what Emmanuel helps us to understand in this book, The Way, the Truth, and the Life, in chapter 154 called Renouncing. And this is our last slide, I believe, when he says, if parents lack understanding, if one's spouse is ungrateful, if brothers and sisters seem cruel, then it's necessary to renounce the happiness of wanting them to be perfect and commit to them even more in order to work for everyone's evolution with Jesus. Renouncing for Christ's sake means giving up the hopes of the world to gain those of heaven. So, really interesting passage from Emmanuel, where he says that, not everybody's going to be able to follow, not everybody's going to be able to understand. We might get some difficult behaviors in our way, but we're going to have to renounce from wanting people to be better. Maybe their time has not arrived yet. Maybe their soil is not ready yet. And so, as sowers, we have again to be respectful of people's times. We have to be understanding that there is a time for everybody, for everyone, just as there's a time for ourselves. We too are not ready to do everything that we are called to do. Although we have heard the message, we're not ready to manifest the message in many, many ways. And that's why we are where we are. So I think that the final message that I want to leave you, yeah, this is my last slide, is that there is a correlation between the sower and our own soil, right? Because we can look at this passage, this parable, thinking of the soils, they're outside of ourselves, and we sowing what we believe to be the truth and the things that we already know that help us. But we have to understand that we also have a soil and that there's a correlation. The better our soil is, the more it is cared for, the more it is rich, the more it will produce. And the fruits that we produce, we'll be able to share those. So, although we are sowers of someone else's soils, we are the agricultures of our own soils. In our own soils, we receive the seeds, and our role is to take care of the soil so that it can be productive and rich and bear fruits. So this is, in 45 minutes, our understanding of this message. We touched briefly in a lot of different points, but I hope that it can give you an idea on how you can do this to any of the parables. You start by really identifying where the parable is. You can look at the words and the meanings of the words. You can identify what the elements are. And finally, what is the message and the applications of the messages to our daily lives. Thank you. Okay, so we have a question here, and the question is how to deal with people who we would like to help, but no matter what we do not see the results with others. Yes. So here at the very end, I think I said something that we need to remember, right? So when I was saying that we are the agricultures of our own souls, of our own soils, people are also responsible for their soils. So as sowers, our job is to spread the seeds. So we throw the seeds. We know that the seeds are not lost, but we are not responsible for the results of the seeds once they are thrown, they are placed in someone else's soil, in someone else's soul. So although I am sharing the truth or the message with someone, now it is on their hands, the ball is on their court, right? The outcome is going to be their responsibility. So let's think about our children, for example. Why is it that in the gospel, Kardec asks specifically, how do we deal with ungrateful children? Are the parents responsible? Well, if you did your job as a sower, if you devoted your very best, which is imperfect, but it's going to be your very best, if you feel like you gave them everything that you could have given, then you can rest in peace at night, because once you discarnate and you have to answer for these souls that have been trusted to your care, what you need to be able to answer to your own conscience is, did you fulfill your job as a sower? Did you give them the best seeds that you could had given, right? Yes, then you did your mission. You did your part. But they are individual spirits, and they are responsible for their own soil. You don't have, you can help cleaning up the soil a little bit, but ultimately, it's their responsibility, it's their job, as much as it is my job, your job, to take care of your own soil and make sure that the seeds will find the appropriate environment to flourish. So once you do your part, it is now on that spirit's, on that soul's responsibility to make sure that the seed is absorbed, integrated, and able to bloom, flourish, and fructify. How can someone reconcile within themselves if they weren't doing their best to sow the message of Jesus, love, light, but not wish to begin later in life to make up for lost time? Um, yeah, it's never too late, right? We cannot go back and change what is behind us. But look, if you didn't do your best at some point, it's because you weren't ready, maybe, to do your best. There were the seed within you was suffocated by other interests, by other things. So the important thing is to take the lessons from the past to empower the present moment, not to crucify yourself, not to fill your mind and heart with shame, guilt, because all those things will do nothing but paralyze you. So once we become aware that there's more that we can do, we take the past and we turn our mistakes into powerful lessons and a leverage to propel us forward. So it's never too late when we think about, if we think about life from a perspective of immortality, it's absolutely never too late. You can actually do more in few years than a lot of people who have been doing very little um, for a long period of time. Look at Kardec himself. He didn't become the codifier until very late in his life, in his 50s. So what is too late, right? Um, all right, so I think I answered this question. Let me just see if there's any other. Okay, I think we have time for this one more. What would you say to someone who feels like they can't be a leader in the field of Christ's work because they have nothing to offer? Yes, so we did touch it on this item, but I'm going to bring a case or a situation that I always remember this when people ask me something like that. Even a person who is in the bed, right, completely paralyzed, completely unable to move or to do anything, still can be a leader in the field of Christ. If he or she, for example, is able to bear that trial with resignation, with patience, with acceptance, and with faith, he or she can be a powerful influence in other people's lives and a powerful messenger of God, even without being able to move one finger. So, like I said, we all of us, and what we need to understand, a lot of times what paralyzes us is comparison. We look at someone who is doing something and we say, I can't do that. I don't have that. I don't have that personality. I don't have that. Well, if God wants us all to be the same and be able to offer the same, the world will not be functional. God needs different talents. So I may be able to say something one way, and you might say something, the same message in a completely different way with a completely different approach. And you say, but that's not the way Suzana did, but that's the way you did. And the way you did, I cannot do it. Only you can do that. And my way might be powerful to some people, but I know I don't please everyone. I know not everyone likes what I have to offer. And that's why they look for different people. They want to listen to different people. So we need diversity, and we need different people doing different things. Um, some things are not, don't move my soul. It's not what I want to do, but other people do with tremendous love and passion, and that is needed and that is valuable. So we don't need to be, you know, leaders of a pack. We need to be leaders of our own initiatives. And if we have a whole bunch of people leading their own lives and putting their own talents at service, and believe me, we all have talents, because we have a heart, because we have a mind, because we have a smile, hands, and so much potential to do our part in making this world a better place and being sowers of love in a world of so much need. Thank you, everyone.